Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Suzanne Weber-Smatko, Manager of Consulting Services here at Core Business Solutions. Glad you could join us again.
Glad to be here, X.
Always great to have you here. Now let's pick up from where we stopped last week. What are the difference between a document and a record from ISO standards point of view?
Yes. You're adding information to a record.
Okay.
So, and that's the other challenge that people face is that we want to list out when we go through a document inventory, they want to list out all the records that they're keeping.
Okay.
No, we don't need to control those records. They don't need approval release like a document would. So for example, you have an inspection checklist. I love to use the inspection checklist as an example. You have a template, right, with all of your characteristics on it. It's like a template, right? You control it.
These are the things you check.
These are the things that you're going to check. You're going to give it to the operator. Your employee is going to start recording variable data, right?
Mm-hmm.
I measured this. They're going to start recording that data. That becomes a record. So when you're adding information to the document, it becomes a record. A management review, for example.
Okay.
We have a template for a management review. We have a certain agenda that you need to cover per the standard. So that template is there. But every time you have a management review and you document your management review, it becomes a management review minutes or a record,
so
right?
So a template is a document.
Yes.
Once it's filled out, if you will,
that's right.
It now becomes a record.
Information is added to it.
Gotcha.
Yes. And quite honestly, I can see how that can be confusing.
Oh, yeah.
Or become a challenge. But once you start getting into it and understanding that the difference between a controlled document and a record, and records really is another section of the standard.
Right.
I'm sure we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that down the road sometime.
Yeah.
But today we're just talking about documents.
Yeah.
But it is important to know and differentiate the difference between those
Definitely.
two. Especially if you're trying to see what you need to control. Hey, don't worry about this.
Don't worry about the records. Could you
Exactly.
imagine like a purchase order from a customer is considered a record?
Right.
Could you imagine trying to list those and control those?
Oh
You
my
can't.
gosh. Yeah, exactly.
So that's the challenge. That's the biggest challenge that I see.
Okay, so you sort of talked about it, and sort of most of our examples are based on this. But how would this apply to a manufacturing organization?
Okay. Well, overall document control as it relates to a manufacturing facility, a service provider, or someone providing technology would approach it all in the same way.
Okay.
There's really no difference. Of course, depending on what you are providing, those documents may differ, right? So if you're in a manufacturing facility, you're going to have more documents as it relates to your operations, shop travelers, inspection checklists, first article forms, work instructions, things like that. But we would apply the same methodology to identify what documents require control.
Okay. So what about service? Is there any specific documents that you might see different from a service organization?
I think that from a service perspective, you might have more templates that are used for, like, for example, if you're providing a service of training, you might have templates for specific training that you're doing. They would need to be controlled.
Well, what about like a call center or like you have to answer questions a certain way? Wouldn't that specifically be something that's controlled from
I think from that perspective, it's probably a work instruction, right? Is something explaining to you how you handle certain calls and what you should say in certain situations or whatnot. So yeah, I would say that would be controlled.
Okay.
For sure. Same for technology organization. I would say for a technology organization or somebody providing some type of technology, the access and controls are pretty important to you, right? Because you might have some proprietary information.
Right.
The document control requirements, as it states in the standard, is certainly something that can protect you and help you. But again, it's really across the board. Each company has to determine what those documents are that need to be controlled. Everybody has to have them.
Right. All right. So you know all about continuous improvement. I know that. Because we talked about it a lot.
Yeah. Never ending improvement.
Never ending improvement. Never ending improvement. And a lot of that comes from measuring things. So what metrics and KPIs should organizations monitor to gauge the effectiveness of their document control system?
Now you're talking.
We're talking. Yeah.
We're talking about that plan, do you check act, right? So you plan what documents that you need to control. You get them to the right people and available and accessible, and You've got change control logs and everything. And now it's time to measure how well your document control system really is. Yeah. I think that you can measure how many cars are actually issued, both from an internal or external or a supplier audit. If you've ever had any cars generated as a result of document control. Corrective action requests.
That's right.
Yes. So if you've ever been written up for document control, you could put a metric in place for how many cars, because, if you have an internal or an external audit and you have, generally, not all the time, but generally your corrective actions may be written up as one whole document control issue, but you could look over a period of time, whether it be semi-annually, and see how many corrective actions have we issued both internally or externally as a result of document control. Perhaps you're doing an internal audit and you walk out and you find somebody using an old set of work instructions that you changed, last month, but they have, a version from 2 years ago. So both from your internal and external findings, see how many. And if you have more than a certain point, set yourself a goal. And if you have over a certain amount of corrective actions, you should probably look at the system overall, because then you have a systemic issue.
Okay.
Maybe timely distribution of documents.
Now, would that be how often things are revised? Yes?
Yeah, I would say but distribution, making them available.
Okay.
You can have an engineering change. Again, through my experience, I'll use an engineering change, for example. You can route an engineering change, which typically impacts fit, form, or function of products. This isn't necessarily applicable to service or technology organizations, but to a manufacturing shop. And they may change a print. And, I change the print today, but it doesn't get through the entire process because of workload or capacity for 6 months. And that print is not available. Well, does the rest of the organization know that there's a revision in the process? You want to make sure that for significant changes to documents that can impact product, especially, that you have a timely distribution of documents. So maybe you want to measure from the time the revision was made to the time that you actually released it.
Okay.
Or made it available and accessible from other employees. And so if it's 6 months, you may have a problem. It may be impacting products between that 6 month time period.
So wouldn't you also have to find a way, and this would probably be documented, I'm assuming, and I think Core actually helps us with this. When you're doing those revisions, there's got to be some test from a manufacturing. If you're changing something, you've got to test to make sure you can make that change, right?
Yes.
And work through a process to make that change. And then once that's completed, you have to make sure it's released onto the actual floor to be made differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the kind of constraints that people face in terms of releasing documents too, is because there might be some type of validation that you need to do to make sure that the change you made, was effective.
Right.
Generally speaking, if you're updating a checklist or a job description or a procedure or a work instruction or all the documents that we've been talking about, they generally don't have an impact like that. So they should not take that long.
Right.
So perhaps you want to set yourself a 30-day between revision and release, or 2 weeks, or you can set the goal. There's nothing in the standard.
But you're measuring it.
But you're measuring it. So then you're measuring it. And again, you're not releasing it for 6 months. You know what? You should probably work on that.
Yeah.
Right. So again, measuring it will allow you to manage it better, to find out if you have a systemic issue or not, or where you can improve.
Okay.
You can measure accuracy and completeness of documents. How many times is one updated and then it goes through a review cycle and has to be rejected because it's not right?
Okay.
Compliance with document control processes and procedures. If you have a procedure for document and record control, maybe you're performing an internal audit to make sure that you're following it, right? You're rolling the revisions, as you say. The people that are involved are the people that are actually doing it, and things like that. Efficiency and effectiveness of document management system and tools. So these are all things that metrics, I think, that or KPIs that an organization can potentially implement to measure how well your document control system is working.
Awesome. Well, this is quite a bit of information. Is there anything else you can think of about when it comes to document control that, people are getting started with this or they're working on it? Any other information you can give us that might be helpful?
Well, I think we talked about just understand understand what documents you do control. Keep it simple. Again, you can't say to an interested party, if they say, what documents do you control? If you can't bring up a list of that, then you're probably. My advice is always to make sure that you start with making an index or a table of contents or some type of list of what documents you need to control.
Right. And you often put somebody in place that helps manage that?
Yeah, most clients that we have, it's either a management representative or a quality manager, or a lot of places, they don't have infinite resources.
Right.
So if you have a document control coordinator, you are lucky.
Right.
But it's usually somebody who's wearing multiple hats.
But somebody should be
takes,
in charge.
You have to have somebody to take ownership of it. There has to be ownership and accountability to document control in order for it to be sustainable and work.
Absolutely. It's always great when you're here, Suze. It's really a pleasure, always a lot of fun, and we really want to thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoy being here. I just can't wait to get to my ring pops.
Oh, there you go. Yes. In case anybody knows, she was one of the consolation winners in our fantasy football league here at Core, and she got ring pops instead of a ring for winning.
I didn't win the ring,
no,
but I did get a bag of ring pops, so I'm thankful for that.
There you go. Well, you enjoy those.
Thank you.
And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, or even customized training, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. And you can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, be sure to do so. That way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day.